March 24th, 1945. The heart of Germany. 30 American Sherman tanks, each weighing over 30 tons, are about to swim across the mighty Rhine River. Swim, you ask? Yes. These weren't ordinary tanks. They were top-secret DD tanks. Amphibious weapons designed to turn the tide of war. But on this fateful day, a force more powerful than any German gun threatened to swallow them whole. In just a few terrifying minutes, half of this armored fleet would vanish beneath the waves. How did this happen, and what became of the soldiers trapped inside? This is the incredible and tragic story of the 736th Tank Battalion's gamble at the Rhine. The end of the war in Europe was in sight, but one final, colossal obstacle remained. The Rhine River. For centuries, this river was Germany's natural fortress, a formidable barrier of water and pride. The Allies knew that to break the back of the Third Reich, they had to cross it in force. Operation Plunder was the name of the mission, a massive, coordinated assault involving over 1 million soldiers. It was bigger than the D-Day landings in Normandy. And spearheading one of the key American thrusts was a revolutionary piece of technology. The duplex drive Sherman tank, or DD tank. Now, what exactly was a DD tank? From a distance, it looked like a normal Sherman M4. But up close, it was something else entirely. It was fitted with a large, collapsible canvas screen. When this screen was raised, it displaced enough water to make the 33-ton tank float. It was essentially a tank in a bathtub. At the rear, 2 propellers, which could be lowered into the water, were powered by the tank's main engine. This allowed the tank to swim at a speed of about 4 knots. The concept was brilliant, born from the mind of Hungarian engineer Nicholas Straussler and perfected by the British. These swimming tanks had already proven their worth on D, landing on the beaches of Normandy and providing crucial fire support for the infantry. But the Rhine was a different beast altogether. Unlike the relatively predictable tides of the English Channel, the Rhine was a fast-flowing, unpredictable river. Its currents were notoriously strong, especially during the spring melt. The plan for the 736th Tank Battalion was bold. On the night of March 23rd, under the cover of darkness, they would launch their 30 DD tanks from the West Bank, near the town of Wallach. Their target was the opposite shore, about 500 yards away, near the German village of Wessel. Their mission, to secure a bridgehead and protect the infantry who were crossing in smaller assault boats. It was a race against time and a high-stakes gamble. The success of the entire crossing in this sector depended on them. The commander of this audacious operation was Lieutenant Colonel George S. Garton. His men of the 736th were well. They had practiced with the DD tanks for months, learning their quirks and limitations. They knew the risks. A single tear in the canvas screen could send the steel behemoth to the bottom in seconds. If the engine stalled, they'd be dead in the water, a sitting duck for German anti-tank guns. The crew of 4 commander, gunner, driver, and co-driver were crammed inside a steel box, surrounded by high explosive shells and thousands of gallons of gasoline, all while floating on a powerful river in the dead of night. The tension must have been unbearable. As darkness fell on March 23rd, the largest artillery barrage on the Western Front since World War I erupted. Over 1,000 guns opened up, pounding the German positions on the East Bank. The sky lit up like day, and the ground shook for miles. This was the signal. Under this deafening umbrella of fire, the DD tanks began to move. They rumbled down the muddy banks, and one by one, with their canvas screens raised high, they plunged into the dark, churning waters of the Rhine. Initially, things seemed to go according to plan. The first wave of tanks entered the water, their engines roaring, propellers churning. From the shore, they looked like strange, ghostly ships gliding through the night. But the river was angrier than anyone had anticipated. The current, estimated at a treacherous 7 to 10 miles per hour, was far stronger than the 4 miles per hour the tank's propellers could manage against it. Immediately, the tanks were in trouble. Instead of moving straight across, they were swept violently downstream. The tank commanders, their heads poking out of the turrets, fought desperately to steer against the powerful flow. But it was a losing battle. The river grabbed hold of the 33-ton machines and pulled them away from their intended landing zone. Inside, The drivers had the throttles wide open, the engines screaming, but they were making little headway. They were at the mercy of the Rhine. Then, disaster struck. A tank, later identified as belonging to a company, suddenly listed to one side. A wave had washed over its screen, pouring cold river water into the hull. The crew barely had time to react. The immense weight of the water pulled the tank down by the front. Within seconds, it was gone, swallowed by the river, taking its crew with it. Panic began to set in. Over the radio, frantic calls for help were drowned out by the roar of the engines and the thunder of the artillery. One after another, the tanks succumbed. Some were swamped by the wake of other boats. Others may have hit submerged debris, tearing their delicate canvas screens. For the crews, it was a terrifying ordeal. As their tanks began to sink, they had mere seconds to escape the hatches before being dragged to the bottom. Some men, weighed down by their gear, were swept away by the current immediately. Others managed to grab onto floating debris or were lucky enough to be picked up by the infantry, as assault boats that were also struggling in the chaos. The scene was one of absolute pandemonium. Flashes from the artillery illuminated the horrifying sight of tanks sinking and men struggling for their lives in the freezing water. Out of the 30 tanks that entered the Rhine that night, 15 were lost to the river. Almost half the force, gone, without a single shot fired by the enemy. It was a catastrophic failure of the plan. The river had proven to be a more formidable foe than the German army, but the story doesn't end there. Despite the devastating losses, the spirit of the American soldiers was not broken. The surviving 15 tanks, battered and scattered, were carried far downstream from their objective. But their commanders refused to give up. They fought the current, found shallower spots, and miraculously managed to crawl ashore, some as far as 2 miles south of their landing zone. They were disorganized and in the wrong place, but they were on the east bank of the Rhine. As dawn broke, these surviving tanks, coated in mud and river weed, immediately joined the fight. They linked up with paratroopers from the 17th Airborne Division who had dropped behind enemy lines just hours before. The sight of American tanks, materializing from the river like steel monsters, was a huge morale boost for the lightly armed paratroopers and a terrifying shock to the German defenders. Together, the tankers and paratroopers began to attack German strongpoints, silence machine gun nests, and clear the way for the main infantry force. The bravery of the crews who survived was astonishing. They had just endured a near-death experience, watched their comrades perish, and were now fighting deep in enemy territory. One tank commander, Lieutenant John WWII, got his tank ashore and immediately engaged a German 88mm gun that was wreaking havoc on the landing forces. Despite the immense danger, he and his crew destroyed the gun position, saving countless lives. The 15 surviving tanks, though few in number, made a crucial difference. They provided the heavy firepower that the initial wave of infantry desperately needed, helping to secure and expand the fragile bridgehead. In the aftermath, the loss of 15 tanks and many of their crews was a grim tally. It was a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of warfare and the immense risks taken by the soldiers on the front lines. The planners had underestimated the power of the Rhine, a fatal miscalculation. Yet, from this disaster emerged a story of incredible resilience and courage. The half of the force that made it across fought with a ferocity that helped ensure Operation Plunder was a success. Within days, the Allies had established solid bridges across the river, and troops and supplies poured into Germany's industrial heartland. The final collapse of the Third Reich was now inevitable. Today, the story of the 736th Tank Battalion's Rhine crossing is a lesser-known chapter of World War II, overshadowed by larger battles. But it serves as a powerful testament to the ingenuity of wartime technology and, more importantly, the sheer guts of the soldiers who had to make it work under the most extreme conditions imaginable. They faced down not just an enemy army, but the raw power of nature itself. They were asked to swim a tank across a raging river in the dark, and against all odds, half of them did. Their sacrifice and their success paved the way for victory. Thank you for watching. If you found this story of courage and struggle as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button and subscribe for more hidden histories from the greatest conflicts in history. Let us know in the comments what other incredible World War II stories you'd like us to cover. See you Next time.